99 years ago, just less than a year after the day that we commemorated this morning when the guns fell silent at the end of World War I in 1918. In 1919, during the World Series, 8 members of the Chicago White Sox helped to throw the series and lose on purpose. They took money from a gambling syndicate that was obviously wagering on the other team, and so they paid off the players, a fairly common ploy. Included amongst those 8 players was a man named Shoeless Joe Jackson. If you've watched Field of Dreams, you know about Shoeless Joe Jackson. Despite the fact that he took the money, at least he admitted to taking $5,000, he batted .375 during the series. He had no errors despite 30 chances in the field. And after his initial admittance, he changed his mind and said he was innocent to his dying day in 1951. There was a trial, a public trial, after the World Series, and all 8 were acquitted by a jury. But the new baseball commissioner, a post that was created because of this crisis, a man named Kennesaw Mountain Landis, he banned them all from any kind of baseball for life. Minor league baseball, major league baseball, exhibition games. He said that if anybody plays against these players, even in exhibition, those people will be banned for life. And so they were entirely blacklisted, what became known as the Black Sox scandal. We expect people on a team to try to win. That's kind of the way it's supposed to work. This is your team. You're supposed to do your best to help your team win. You might lose, right? You might, the ball might go through your ankles, and you might make an error. You might drop the big pass. But we expect that you're trying to win, right? That's the whole point of sport. And every time we hear of someone either cheating to win or throwing a game primarily because of gambling, it's a serious issue. Shoeless Joe Jackson is not in the Hall of Fame to this day. There have been efforts to get him reinstated and put into the Hall of Fame. He has the 3rd highest batting average for a career in history behind Rogers Hornsby and Ty Cobb, but he's not in the Hall of Fame, and he may never get there because at this moment, even though it doesn't seem like he did anything, he took the money, and he was part of a group that sabotaged their team's chances. FYI, the White Sox didn't go back, didn't win the pennant for the next 20 years, didn't win the World Series for more than 30 years. People called it the curse of the Black Sox. Before that, they were a perennial playoff team. So it's an amazing turnaround. Now that's enough about baseball. It is the off season of baseball. Now let's take a look at Joshua chapter 7, and we're going to see something in some ways similar. With someone on the team that is not doing what they're supposed to be doing. So let's start with verse 1. It says, "But the Israelites were unfaithful in regard to the devoted things. Achan, son of Carmi, the son of Zimri, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, took some of them. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel." 2 things I want you to note in this first verse. Number 1, it says the Israelites were unfaithful, and then it says at the end, the Lord's anger burned against Israel. Even though this chapter is about the choices and the decisions made by one man. We already know his name. He'll be part of the narrative later. His name was Achan. So 99.9% of the people of Israel obeyed the Lord about the devoted things. They destroyed them. They didn't try to keep any of them. But Achan did not. And because he did not, the consequences of his decision and his sin will be felt throughout this chapter. Notice that it says the Israelites were unfaithful. That doesn't mean they stopped believing in God. That's not how faithful is being used there. They were unfaithful in that they did not obey God. Trust and obedience go together. We have a hymn about that, right? Trust and obey. It's a great one. They have to go together because your actions confirm what you believe. And in this case, it's not that Achan didn't believe in God, didn't think God didn't exist. He didn't follow God's commands, and so he was unfaithful. We'll see what happens as a consequence of that. Starting in verse 2, it says, Now Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is near Bethaven, to the east of Bethel, and told them, Go up and spy out the region. So the men went up and spied out Ai. Now remember, last week we saw the fall of Jericho. Now Jericho has been conquered. The path into the interior, into the uplands, is open, and now it's Joshua's turn to decide, where do we go next? What is the next target? And so he sends out some spies to take a look at one of the options, take a look at the city, find out what we're looking at. Here's what they had to say, starting in 3. When they returned to Joshua, they said, Not all the army will have to go up against Ai. Send 2,000 or 3,000 men to take it, and don't weary the whole army, for only a few people live there. So about 3,000 went up, but they were routed by the men of Ai, who killed about 36 of them. They chased the Israelites from the city gate as far as the stone quarries and struck them down on the slopes. At this, the hearts of the people melted in fear and became like water. So the spies report that there's really nobody there. Now, the next chapter will reveal that there were about 6,000 men in Ai. So something is amiss here. We don't know what happened. Either the spies were mistaken, right? They didn't understand what they were seeing. Maybe some subterfuge by the people in the city to hide their true numbers. Or they were overconfident. We don't know what happened. But when the spies report that it's really not much of much, Joshua only sends 3,000. And those 3,000, are routed. And by routed, I mean they turned tail and ran. That whatever happened on that field, it went against them, and the men took off running. Unexpectedly routed, but decisively routed. There were 3,000 or so men, and only 36 died, and that's a small number in a rout. Often a rout, especially in ancient history, is where you have the worst casualties. When the army retreats, when they run away, people get speared in the back. They get trampled and run down by the enemy cavalry. It is a very dangerous time when the army breaks. Only 36 died, but on the other hand, 36 men lost their lives here. Now, we're already seeing a connection between what Achan did and what happened here, and that will be made clear. 36 people lost their lives because of this. For those 36 families, obviously, this was devastating. And for their relations and their clan, it was an incredible thing. It says, At this, the hearts of the people melted in fear and became like water. Now, they had just destroyed Jericho really without doing much, right? They walked around the city a bunch of times, the wall fell down, and they went in. It was easy. This is a smaller engagement with only a little portion of the army, and after they lose, everybody's afraid. So despite that spectacular victory, just days or weeks before, now everyone is in fear. Let's see what happens next. It says, Then Joshua tore his clothes and fell face down to the ground before the ark of the Lord, remaining there till evening. The elders of Israel did the same and sprinkled dust on their heads. This is Joshua's response. This is the extent of his concern. This is how seriously he took this defeat. He tears his clothes. That's a sign of mourning. He falls face down before the ark. He knew where he needed to go. He knew who he needed to go to for help. Joshua didn't think, this is a tactical error, this is a strategic error, we just need to do this differently. He went right to the ark and said, I'm going to wait here. Notice he fell down on his face and stayed there until evening. He basically said, I'll just stay here. I don't know what's going on, I will stay here, but this is where the answer is. Joshua certainly understood that this was a spiritual matter more than a military one. Notice that the elders of Israel did the same. Joshua had support. It wasn't just him. We hear mainly about Joshua. But these elders of Israel, they didn't blame Joshua for the defeat. They didn't question Joshua's actions here. They sat down in the dirt with him, put dust on their head, which is a sign of mourning, and said, we'll sit here with you. At the end of that time, Joshua was going to speak. It says, and Joshua said, alas, sovereign Lord, why did you ever bring this people across the Jordan to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us? If only we'd been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. Kind of reminiscent of our text this morning from Exodus, right? When Moses says to the Lord, you brought them up out of Egypt, don't destroy them here. Joshua is saying, why did we ever come here? Right? Despite the fact that there was a major victory at Jericho just recently. Hi. Oh, what are you doing?
I don't hear fine.
Okay, we'll go with Mom and figure that out. Something is gone. It's a crisis. She needs to get it sorted out. This is not the first time that God has heard people say, what are you doing? What's the plan, God? This thing's not working. Before they crossed the Red Sea, the people said that. After they crossed the Red Sea, the people said that. Why did you bring us out here, Moses, to die in the desert? Wow. Complain. I think it shows us how desperate Joshua is in this moment, how his own confidence was shattered by the loss at Ai. He's not done talking. He's going to say this, pardon your servant, Lord, what can I say? Now that Israel has been routed by its enemies, the Canaanites, and the other people of the country will hear about this, and they will surround us and wipe out our name from the earth. What then will you do for your own great name? I think Joshua knew that this was ice that was thin that he was walking out. He was out on a limb because he starts with, pardon your servant, but what can I say? All right, he felt compelled to say what he's about to say, but he knows that it might anger the Lord. But as the leader of the people, he feels that this is what he needs to say. Imagine this. They lost 36 men, but there's about 600,000 men in their entire army. It's a minuscule amount. And yet Joshua in his mind is saying, if the Lord is not with us, if you are not fighting with us, they will surround us and they will wipe us out to the last man. That's how little confidence he had in his own strategic brilliance, in the training of the army, of all that. That counted for nothing. Their numbers mattered not. He said, if you are not with us, they will destroy us, and this will be the end of Abraham's race. The Lord responds. The Lord said to Joshua, stand up. What are you doing down on your face? I just stopped after just that one verse because I think that's interesting. Joshua's fear that the worst would happen, that the nation would be destroyed, is unfounded. We know that it is unfounded because we know that God had promised to Abraham that his nation would be as numerous as the sand of the seashore, that this land would be theirs forever. Those are promises that cannot be set aside because God made that promise and swore by himself. He said to Abraham, I can't swear by anything else because I am the greatest thing that exists. So I will swear by my own name that this will come to be. No setback can stop that. No turn in the wrong direction can thwart that. So at first thing God says is, stand back up, Joshua. This is an overreaction. But a serious issue is still at hand. Here it is. Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenant, which I commanded them to keep. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen. They have lied. They have put them with their own possession. Notice the plural pronouns. They. And you're all thinking, hey, it was just Achan. Chill out. But no. God says they have failed. You see, God did not abandon his people. He was not going to abandon his people. He has a covenant with them. but he will not tolerate violations of his commands. Because it is a covenant, because they have made a pact, because they have sworn that they will keep the commands of God. And so God says, you are in violation of the covenant. You, plural, the people are in violation. And that has led to this, verse 12. That is why the Israelites cannot stand against their enemies. They turn their backs and run because they have been made liable to destruction. I will not be with you anymore unless you destroy whatever among you is devoted to destruction. In other words, the nation has been contaminated by the things that were in Jericho. Those things were all devoted to destruction, and because they are with the people, that contamination is now affecting the entire nation, and God says, if you don't get rid of it, we're not moving forward. Notice at the end of the last chapter, if you remember last week, we were told God was with Joshua. Achan's sin, the sin of Achan, his choice in this matter, has driven a wedge between Joshua and God, between the people and God. Not to mention the fact that 36 men have died. There is a division now between God and his people. It cannot function again while his people are sinning. For a very simple reason, God is holy. God is righteous. God is pure. God is just. And he has remained stationary. The people have wandered away from him because of Achan. That's what sin always is. It is our breaking the relationship. It is not God abandoning us. It's us walking away from God. And that is what has happened because of what this one man did. What's the solution? We know the problem. God has told Joshua what is happening and what will continue to happen unless they fix it. So what are they going to do? Here's the instruction. Go consecrate the people. Tell them, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. There are devoted things among you, Israel. You cannot stand against your enemies until you remove them. So God's about to tell them how to fix the problem, but he says, first things first, you need to consecrate yourselves. We've seen this is the third time in Joshua. We've seen them being told to consecrate themselves. In other words, they need to be prepared to encounter the Lord on the next day. They need to be prepared to hear what God has to say. And Joshua is to tell the people, spend the day getting ready for what God is going to say tomorrow and what he's going to do. Here's what he's going to do. In the morning, present yourselves tribe by tribe. The tribe the Lord chooses shall come forward clan by clan. The clan the Lord chooses shall come forward family by family. And the family the Lord chooses shall come forward man by man. Whoever is caught with the devoted things shall be destroyed by fire, along with all that belongs to him. He has violated the covenant of the Lord and has done an outrageous thing in Israel. Notice the plan. They're going to come one group by group until it gets narrowed all the way down to just this one man. Notice it says, whoever is caught. It makes you wonder, what would have happened if Achan would have confessed today? Not before he was found out, but today, after he saw what happened at Ai. If he had thought to himself, this is my fault, I did this. If he had dug the things up, brought it to Joshua, fell on his knees and said, forgive me, Lord, I have sinned. Might he have been spared? I don't know. Probably. But he didn't do that. Notice that everything will be destroyed by fire. They're treating this like an infection, because sin is like an infection and it can spread. It needs to be purged. It needs to be gotten rid of. Notice that all the things that belong to him are going to be destroyed too. That infection has spread to all of Achan's possessions. All of it will be destroyed by fire as if it belonged to the people of Jericho. An illustration of how serious this is, how threatening to the people of God this situation is. Early the next morning, Joshua had Israel come forward by tribes, and Judah was chosen. The clans of Judah came forward, and the Zerahites were chosen. He had the clan of the Zerahites come forward by families, and Zimri was chosen. Joshua had the family come forward man by man, and Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zimri, the son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah, was chosen. Imagine this. You get all 12 tribes, right? 99.9% of the people have no idea what they're here about. And 11 tribes after that first choosing are like, whew, it's not us. Everybody in Judah's going, uh-oh, who did it, right? And then they knock it down to the clan within Judah. Now all the Zerahites are saying, who was it? Who did it? I don't know. Maybe some nervous people in there with a little guilty conscience, right? Going, uh-oh, is it me? Did I do it? But they know that it's about the devoted thing, so they all know, well, it's not me. Achan doesn't say a word. As they go from Judah to the Zerahites to Zimri, he's got to know, right? He's got to know this is about you. God knows this is not a secret. And yet he waits. Tribe, clan, family, and then each man, one after another. He's in line behind 3, 4 guys. Who knows how many were in line in front of him? Not you, not you, not you. There it is. Achan is chosen. Not because he confessed, but because he was found out. There's a vast difference between those two, aren't there? When people, because of their own shame, because of their own guilt, their remorse, when they confess their crimes, versus when the proof is right in front of them, and then they find the time to come on TV with the tears and say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do it, even though I was hiding it and lying about it and all this time. Far more trust in a confession that is voluntary than one when you're cornered. This man is now cornered. Then Joshua said to Achan, my son, give glory to the Lord, the God of Israel, and honor him. Tell me what you've done. Do not hide it from me. Joshua says, give glory to the Lord, not because he's asking him to say something, but he's asking him to be honest. Do not dishonor God by pretending that you're not caught. Don't dishonor God by pretending that he does not have the right to judge you. You are caught. It is over. Admit it now. This is his last chance, right? If he fails now, there is little hope for this man's soul. If he confesses now, even though he waited until the very end, at least there's a chance. It's too late for his life, but maybe he can save his soul. Verse 20, Achan replied, it's true. I have sinned against the Lord, the God of Israel. This is what I've done. When I saw the plunder, a beautiful robe from Babylonia, 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, I coveted them and took them. They are hidden in the ground inside my tent with the silver underneath. Well, at least he didn't harden his heart at the last moment. At least he didn't do what Pharaoh said, right? Pharaoh said, I don't care. I will stand against God. It does not matter how bad this gets. I will not. And even after he let them go, he changed his mind. At least Achan, at the very last moment when he's standing on the precipice, says it's true. I did it. Notice the progression. I coveted them. I took them. Sin happens that way so many times. We see something, we have the desire, and then we do it. That's the way it always works, from an idea to an emotion to an action. But notice where it was. Where were the fruits of his sin? Where were the ill-gotten gains? They were buried in the ground. What good were they doing Achan there? Not a bit. What use was he getting out of that fancy robe? What use was he able to put that money to? Nothing. The fruits of sin are not to be enjoyed. They had to be hidden. Why were they hidden? Why did he hide them? You know why he hid them. He hid them because he knew he wasn't supposed to have them. He hid them because he knew that if people saw them, he would be exposed. Where'd you get that nice coat? How come you got money all of a sudden? He hid them because he knew he was in the wrong. His conscience was panging him. His guilt was evident in his actions. And yet he waited, and he waited, and he waited. Verse 22. So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran to the tent, and there it was, hidden in his tent with the silver underneath. They took the things from the tent, brought them to Joshua and all the Israelites, and spread them out before the Lord. Despite the confession, Joshua takes the time to confirm it, to make sure that it's true, because of how serious this is. And then, here is the ending. We've got 2 sections left. Then Joshua, together with all Israel, took Achan, son of Zerah, the silver, the robe, the gold bar, his sons and daughters, his cattle and donkeys and sheep, his tent, and all that he had to the valley of Achor. Joshua said, "Why have you brought this trouble on us? The Lord will bring trouble on you today." You see, the entire nation had suffered because of Achan's sin, and in order to rectify it, Joshua brings everybody out to this valley to see this. Everybody will witness what is about to happen. Now, we saw that phrase right in the middle, right? His sons and daughters were brought. We'll look at that in the next section because we're questioning, why are they being brought along? All that he had was brought, though. His whole household, his animals, his clothing, his tent, everything was brought. Nothing that belonged to Achan was left behind. 36 people died. Joshua said, "Why have you brought this trouble on us?" Imagine that, being responsible for the deaths of 36 innocent people. How could you live with that? And he was. And here is the ending, the second half of 25 through 26. Then all Israel stoned him, and after they had stoned the rest, they burned them. Over Achan they heaped up a large pile of rocks, which remains to this day. Then the Lord turned from his fierce anger. Therefore that place has been called the Valley of Achor ever since. There isn't a form of capital punishment that is free of a gruesome element, is there? Firing squad, hanging, guillotine, lethal injection, stoning, crucifixion. They're all, in their own way, gruesome. This is no easy one. Obviously, I don't think all 600,000 people grabbed a stone and threw it, but maybe representatives from every tribe were chosen to step forward. And then we have that second phrase, and after they had stoned the rest. There is ambiguity in the English, there is ambiguity in the original Hebrew, and there's ambiguity in many of the different translations, the Greek Septuagint, the Syriac, and some of the other translations. We're not told explicitly what the rest are. We're not told who was burned. It says they burned them. Deuteronomy 24:16 says, "Fathers shall not be put to death for their children, nor children put to death for their fathers. Each is to die for his own sins." In the Mosaic law, they had a provision that said, if your father commits a crime, you can't be punished for it. And if your child commits a crime, you can't be punished for it. It's hard to say if that applies here. Because of the ambiguity, the different commentators take this passage 2 different ways. Some say that Achan's children were grown adults, and so therefore they knew what Achan was doing and had guilt along with Achan because they were a part of it. The text doesn't say anything to us about Achan's children, what they did. We don't know anything about their age. We don't know anything about how many they are. We don't know anything. So some commentators say that they died because of Achan's sin. And if they died for Achan's sin, that is just a further reminder of how serious this is. Other commentators say, no, they didn't. They were brought out there to witness what happened to their father so that they could be on the side of Israel that says this is what happens. And if that's the case, imagine them standing there watching their father. There's no good way to read that phrase. This is difficult no matter what. We ask ourselves, as part of the covenant people, would God destroy Achan's whole family? Would he treat them like the Canaanites in this case? Would he treat them to a higher standard because of their part of the covenant? Would he show mercy because of their part of the covenant? We don't have an answer because of the ambiguity here. But leave no doubt that this was a serious matter. It, the least, for Achan, cost him his life and the 36 men who, as a consequence, died as well. His greed led to the utter destruction of everything he owned. Think about that. He stole things because he had lust and greed for them. And in the end, everything he owned was burned. But is that not the way greed always works? We claw, we fight, we scrap for things that don't belong to us, and we end up destroying what we think that we're bettering. How many people have destroyed their family because of their greed for money? We probably all know somebody that's been down that road. A marriage torn apart, kids that won't speak to their father. We don't need to listen to Cat in the Cradle in order to get that idea in our head. We see this. It says, "Then the Lord turned from his fierce anger." Once the sin was dealt with, once justice had been done, God didn't hold a grudge. God didn't remain angry. He said, now we can go back to the relationship we had. Now it is fixed. Now we will be back as a covenant people once more. That's a tough passage. There's three things that I think that we need to remember from this. Three things that we should walk away with. Number one, the consequence of sin. Just one sin or multiple sins. In this case, it was really one thing. The consequence of sin from one person can affect many people. This fallacy that you hear, I'm not hurting anybody, it's my life, I can do what I want, that means nothing for the people of God. Because one mistake, one sin, one failure can destroy many people. Secondly, the truth, as they say, will out. God knew who had sinned. Hiding it in the ground did not thwart God. He knew exactly who it was all along. And that is true for each one of us as well. And then thirdly, and this is a serious and sober reminder, if you endanger the people of God, you provoke the wrath of God. Because the people of God are the children of God. If you are causing them danger because of your sin, if you are intentionally hurting the people of God, take heart, or take caution, because provoking the wrath of God is not a small thing. Something to always remember. That's a difficult passage. We're going to pause from Joshua after this. We're going to look at a couple of Psalms of praise the next 2 weeks before we get into Advent. But I think we've seen some things from Joshua about the seriousness of the relationship between God and his people, about the seriousness of the consequences of sin for the people of Jericho, for the people of Israel.